The wind over Karath Plateau carried the scent of iron and dust. Beneath a pallid sky, rows of furnaces burned within stone bunkers, their throats roaring with the breath of molten metal. Workers moved between them in padded suits, hauling crucibles with the coordination of an ancient ritual. The clang of hammers rolled through the valley, echoing off cliffs darkened by centuries of soot. Among the smiths walked a single man who did not belong there. He wore no insignia, no identification badge, and his coat was marked with long stains from travel. His name was Oren Valen, once a navigator of the Star Carriers, long before the fleets fell silent. The firelight caught the lines of fatigue around his eyes as he passed through the camp, unnoticed amid the rhythm of labor. He came to the edge of the foundry where the plateau opened toward a chasm. Across that abyss stretched the skeletal outline of a colossal structure, the beginnings of a new vessel, shaped not for the skies of Karath, but for the gulf between worlds. Its half-forged hull hung in suspension above the pit, tethered by magnetic cranes. Sparks fell from its ribs like meteors, disappearing into the void below. Oren stopped beside a younger worker guiding a cargo drone. "Who commands this construction?" he asked. The youth straightened, startled. "The Council of Reclamation, traveler. They send us schematics. We build what they dream. You should not linger so near the edge." Oren gazed into the void where the structure hung. "They mean to fly it, so they say, though no one here believes it will ever leave the plateau. The last attempt ended in wreckage and smoke." Oren said nothing. He had seen what became of failed departures before. When the worker turned back to his task, Oren descended a narrow stair carved into the cliffside. At its base lay a shelter of glass and composite panels, its surface scratched by dust storms. Inside, a single woman bent over a table crowded with blueprints. Her hair was bound in a rough knot, her sleeves rolled past her elbows, and her fingers moved with precise intent across the pages. "Your perimeter guards are lax," Oren said. She did not look up. "They know me. They know that if they interfere with my work, the ship will never rise. You speak with confidence, because I designed it." At that, she lifted her gaze. Her eyes were gray, sharp with sleepless focus. "You have walked a long way to stand in my workshop. Who are you?" "Oren Valen," he said simply. She paused, recognition stirring behind her expression. "The pilot who vanished with the convoy of the third wave. I am the one who returned." The woman's hands stilled upon the blueprints. "Impossible. None of you came back from the rim. The storm fields consume everything." "They consume almost everything," Oren corrected, "but not memory and not vengeance." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of machinery outside. Then she gestured toward the single chair opposite her. "Sit. Tell me what survived you." Oren obeyed. The seat was cold, the table cluttered with fragments of alloys and etched diagrams. "We thought the rim held nothing but ghosts," he said. "But there are cities out there, built inside the ruins of fallen moons. Their builders call themselves the harbingers of continuance. They claim to be older than humankind, though I doubt they remember their own birth. They gather fragments of every civilization that dies, preserving them in vaults so deep no light can reach. When they found us, they took our ship apart atom by atom. They wanted to know how far humanity had come, how we built machines that could think without dreaming." The woman listened without interruption. Oren's voice grew hoarse as he spoke, as though each word carried the grit of long years. "They tested us. They wanted to see if we would break when they rewrote the laws around us. Some begged, some fought, some prayed. I watched every one of them fade into the cold until there was only me. And then they told me their purpose, that the void itself was dying. That the stars were not eternal, only the memory of their birth repeated by machines. They claimed humanity was the next memory to be stored. You escaped," the woman said quietly. "I was released." She frowned. "Released? Why?" "They said I carried something they could not decipher, that my kind had built something they never could, faith without proof." The woman leaned back, her expression unreadable. "You speak like one touched by radiation or madness." "Perhaps both," Oren said, "but what they showed me is why I came here. The Council's vessel, it is meant to reach the rim, is it not? Her hesitation was answer enough. They call it the Ardent Hope, she said at last. It is the final project before the Council disbands. The surface cities are starving, the mines are dry. They believe a new world waits beyond the cloud seas, one last cradle for our kind. I am charged with making the ship strong enough to survive the jump through the storm field. Oren reached across the table, touching the edge of her schematics. Then you must listen to me. The field is not weather, it is defense. It was built to keep us out. By the harbingers, by something older still. Outside, the roar of the furnaces deepened as more fuel was fed into their throats. The entire plateau seemed to tremble under its own ambition. The woman's gaze turned toward the window. You came here to warn me, to offer you a chance, Oren said. If you build this vessel as they plan, it will never pass through the storm. But if you build it as I know how, it might. She studied him for a long moment. You ask me to trust a ghost. I ask you to trust survival. Her name, he learned later that night, was Althea Rehen. She had once served as chief architect for the orbital assembly before the stations fell into mutiny and drifted into darkness. Since then, she had remained on Karath, constructing machines that never reached completion. The Ardent Hope was her redemption or her punishment. As the night deepened, they moved between blueprints and prototypes, arguing in low voices. Oren described the pulse engines used by the harbingers, the strange lattice that allowed them to fold light into corridors of motion. Althea countered with equations of mass balance, with the stubborn physics of human limitations. They circled the impossible like duelists, their tempers sharpening into respect. When dawn came, the first of the plateau's suns rose through the haze. The furnaces dimmed, and the workers collapsed in exhaustion. Oren stood beside Althea outside the glass shelter, watching the Ardent Hope gleam with unfinished promise. Tell me, she said quietly, what drives you back into that storm? Oren's gaze remained fixed on the vessel. Because they kept something from me, a fragment of our ship's core, our memory lattice. Without it, the truth of what happened to the third wave will vanish when I die. Humanity deserves to know why we were chosen. Chosen for what? To forget. For a moment neither spoke. Then Althea nodded slowly. Then let us remember in defiance. Thus began the union of two obsessions, a pilot haunted by the impossible and an engineer determined to master it. Over the following weeks, rumors spread across the plateau, whispers of forbidden designs, of engines shaped from principles the Council had outlawed. Workers noticed strange deliveries arriving in sealed containers, marked with no origin. At night, blue light flickered beneath the hull, illuminating symbols no one could translate. The Council grew suspicious. Envoys came to question Althea, but her answers were precise, her records impeccable. No one dared challenge her authority outright. The plateau continued its work, forging destiny beneath the ash-colored skies. Oren became a figure of myth among the workers. Some said he had seen the stars die and returned to warn them. Others said he was a spy from the old colonies, come to steal the ship's secrets. Only Althea knew the truth, or enough of it to keep building. One evening, as the suns dipped below the cliffs, Oren climbed to the highest ridge above the foundry. From there, he could see the entire expanse of Karath, the labyrinth of furnaces, the distant shimmer of the desert beyond, and above it all, the thin blue scar of the storm field visible even from this world. It stretched across the heavens like a wound that refused to heal. He felt the old dread rise within him, the same dread that had gripped him when the third wave vanished into that light. But beneath it lay something else, a flicker of resolve that no storm could erase. He descended again to the camp. Althea met him at the edge of the construction zone, holding a data plate etched with luminous text. It works, she said simply. Oren took the plate, scanning its display. You managed to stabilize the field compression? For 3 seconds, she admitted. Then the core melted through its casing. 3 seconds is enough to prove it can be done. She smiled faintly. That is what frightens me. The following nights blurred into one long labor. The plateau's sky turned red with the reflection of their ambition. Metal groaned, energy surged, and every sensor screamed warnings that Althea ignored. Oren guided her through the configurations he remembered from the Harbinger's vaults, though his memories came in fragments, like a language learned in a dream. When at last the prototype engine stabilized for a full minute, the entire camp erupted in awe. The machine stood silent, yet space around it shimmered, as though reality itself trembled in anticipation. Althea whispered, "This is not human technology." "It is now," Oren replied, but their triumph did not remain secret for long. Drones from the council arrived, bearing a single order: to dismantle the prototype immediately and return to sanctioned schematics. The council's overseer, a stern man named Rector Talvin, delivered the decree himself. "You play with relics that should have stayed buried," Talvin warned. "The last time humanity imitated the unknown, entire continents fell." Althea faced him without fear. "Then perhaps those continents deserve to fall. If we do not learn from the impossible, we are doomed to repeat mediocrity." Talvin's expression hardened. "Defiance will end this project." Oren stepped forward. "You cannot end what you do not understand." Talvin's gaze shifted to him. "And who are you, wanderer?" "The only man who has seen beyond your horizon." For a heartbeat, the overseer studied him with cold disdain. Then he turned to his guards. "Confine them both until the council decides whether their arrogance merits execution or exile." The guards moved to obey. Oren raised his hand. The prototype engine pulsed once, a low vibration that made the air hum. Every sensor in the camp flickered to life, and the magnetic cranes around the Ardent Hope trembled. "Stop," Althea hissed. "You will bring it down on us." Oren released the command. The vibration ceased. Dust drifted from the ceiling of the shelter. Talvin's composure cracked, if only for an instant. "You will destroy us all with your heresy." "Or save us," Oren said. That night they were locked inside a storage cell carved into the cliffside. The guards sealed the door with magnetic clamps, leaving them in darkness. Althea sat with her back against the wall. "You could have killed us all." "Not yet," Oren said. She laughed softly. "I should hate you." "You will before this ends." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the distant thunder of the furnaces. Somewhere beyond the wall, the Ardent Hope waited, half finished, half alive. When the first light seeped through the narrow slit of the cell window, it carried a strange color, the blue of the storm field, far brighter than ever before. Althea frowned. "That should not be visible from here." Oren rose. "It means they have noticed us." "Who?" "The ones who let me go." Outside, the plateau shuddered. The plateau trembled long before the alarms began to sound. Workers ran between the furnaces, shouting orders no one could hear over the roar of engines that were not their own. The air thickened with static until every strand of hair stood on end. Oren and Althea forced open the cell door with a metal rod pried from its hinges. Sparks rained as the magnetic clamps gave way. Beyond the corridor, the compound lay in chaos. Sirens wailed, warning lights stuttered, and the horizon burned with a strange aurora that cut through the dawn haze. Althea caught Oren's arm. "What have you done?" "Nothing," he said. "This is not me." They pushed through the confusion, climbing toward the open ridge. From there they saw it, a sphere of light suspended above the chasm where the Ardent Hope hung in its scaffold. The sphere pulsed with a rhythm too perfect to be random. Each beat rippled across the sky, bending clouds into concentric rings. The workers had stopped to stare. The overseer, Rector Talvin, stood among them with his mouth half open, fear and awe warring on his face. Oren whispered, "It is a beacon." "From the storm?" Althea asked. "Through it." Even as they watched, the sphere fractured. Threads of radiance streamed outward, weaving into a lattice that touched the unfinished hull of the Ardent Hope. Metal screamed. The ship's framework glowed as if the light had ignited it from within. Althea started forward. "They are tearing it apart." Oren grabbed her wrist. "No, they are searching." "For what?" "For me." The lattice brightened. Workers fled in panic as the glow spread across the scaffold. Oren's instincts flared. He had seen this before in the vaults of the Harbingers, when they opened a mind to read its history. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the command shelter. Althea followed, dodging debris that rained from the trembling structure. Inside, the main console still functioned, though half its displays had turned to static. Oren slammed his palm against the control pad. "We can ground the ship," Althea shouted. "Cut the conduits and drop it into the pit." "No," Oren said. "If we sever the link, they will destroy the entire plateau to erase the evidence." "Then what?" He typed a sequence so quickly that the screen barely kept pace. "We give them what they want, a signal strong enough to draw their attention elsewhere." Althea watched the data scroll. "You are activating the prototype core," Oren nodded. "It will amplify the field, reflect their scan. They will think I am already leaving the world. And if it fails, then they will know where to aim." She exhaled sharply, then moved to assist him. "You are either mad or desperate. Both have their uses." The ground convulsed as the ardent hope began to hum, a low vibration that resonated in the chest more than the ears. The lattice of light reacted, curling inward, drawn toward the ship's center. Energy surged through the conduits. For an instant, the unfinished vessel seemed whole, radiant, immense, alive. Then the sphere in the sky imploded. The lattice collapsed, leaving only a fading shimmer. The roar of the furnaces died to a whisper. Oren leaned against the console, breath ragged. It worked. Althea steadied herself beside him. "You just convinced gods to look the other way." "No," he murmured, "only their memories." By evening, the council's drones circled above the plateau. They recorded the damage: scorched metal, collapsed scaffolds, a single ship still clinging to existence. The workers were herded into shelters, questioned by officials who refused to believe what they had seen. Talvin confronted Oren and Althea near the wreckage. His face was pale with fury. "You will answer for this catastrophe. Hundreds could have died." "None did," Althea said. "By fortune, not design," Talvin snapped. "The council demands an explanation." Oren met his gaze calmly. "Tell them the storm reached for us. Tell them it will reach again if we do nothing." Talvin hesitated. "You expect me to spread panic?" "I expect you to prepare," Oren said. "The barrier between worlds is weakening. Something is coming through." The overseer's lips tightened. "You speak of superstition. Then pray you are right." When Talvin turned away, his shoulders trembled. He feared Oren's words even as he denied them. Over the next days, the plateau returned to a fragile rhythm. The furnaces burned again, though many of the workers refused to approach the chasm. The ardent hope lay wounded, its hull warped where the lattice had touched it. Yet beneath the damage, Althea found patterns in the scorched metal lines that did not belong to her design. "They left something," she told Oren, tracing the marks with a gloved hand. "Equations or maybe instructions." He studied the patterns. "Coordinates," he said at last. "To where?" "To a place beyond the storm." Her eyes widened. "Then they want you to return. They want me to remember." Oren felt the old weight settle upon him. In the years since his release, he had tried to forget the vaults, the faces preserved in crystal, the voices that spoke without mouths. But the memory never faded. It only waited. That night he dreamed of the rim. In his dream, the storm field opened like an iris, and within its heart stood figures made of shifting light. They spoke in unison, a language of pure resonance. "You carry what we lost. You will complete the pattern." He awoke drenched in sweat, the echo still ringing in his skull. Outside, the plateau slept beneath a thin veil of mist. Althea sat by the window, awake. "I heard you speaking," she said softly. "You said not yet." Oren rubbed his eyes. "They want me to finish what they began, which is to turn humanity into memory." She rose. "Then we must finish first." Their partnership deepened in the weeks that followed. Althea dismantled the damaged sections of the Ardent Hope, integrating the alien coordinates into the navigation lattice. Oren scouted the nearby valleys for mineral caches, searching for elements strong enough to withstand the next test. They spoke little of the council, though they knew its patience was waning. One evening, as the suns bled into twilight, Oren found Althea standing on the edge of the chasm, watching the workers below. "They fear us," she said. "I see it in their eyes. They think we bring ruin." Fear is the shape of progress, Oren replied. She looked at him. Do you believe that? I have seen what happens to those who fear nothing. They build monuments to their own extinction. Althea smiled faintly. Then let us build defiance instead. She handed him a fragment of alloy. This came from the lattice. It resists every test we have tried. It bends light, distorts mass, and yet it holds no energy of its own. It is a vessel. Oren turned it in his hand. The surface shimmered, reflecting not the plateau but a field of distant stars. A memory shell, he murmured. What is that? The harbingers used them to store echoes of consciousness. When one of them died, its essence was poured into such a shell, preserved until it could be reborn within the machines. Althea stared at the fragment. Then this was alive. In a way, she hesitated, and if we use it, then perhaps our ship will be more than metal and fire. They built in secret, crafting a new core around the fragment. The workers believed they were repairing damage. None suspected they were forging something unprecedented. The alloy responded to their touch as if it remembered being shaped before. When the core finally came online, it emitted no light, no heat. Yet every instrument within the compound registered a subtle change, the sense that space itself had become attentive. Oren whispered to it, testing an old phrase from the vaults. Do you know me? A faint vibration answered, like the breath of a sleeping giant. Althea frowned. What did it say? That it remembers. The council returned sooner than expected. This time, not just drones, but a full delegation arrived, officials in polished armor, escorted by soldiers carrying rifles that hummed with charge. Rector Talvin led them once again, though his demeanor had shifted from anger to fear masked as authority. The council demands immediate cessation of your experiments, he declared. You are to surrender all research materials and stand for inquiry. Althea folded her arms. If the council wishes to halt the only vessel capable of leaving this dying world, it condemns itself. Your arrogance blinds you, Talvin said. We have reports that your tests altered atmospheric conditions across the entire hemisphere. There were auroras in cities that have not seen light for generations. Proof that we touched the storm, Althea said. Proof that you tampered with forces beyond comprehension, Talvin countered. Oren stepped forward. You fear comprehension more than ignorance. If the storm opens again, this world will not survive. Let us finish what we began. Talvin's gaze flicked between them. If you defy this order, you will be declared fugitives. Then we will be the first fugitives to reach the stars, Althea said. The soldiers raised their weapons. The moment hung in silence. Then the ground shook. From the chasm rose a column of blue fire. The ardent hope lifted, its half-complete hull shedding fragments of metal like scales. The new core pulsed at its center, drawing power from nothing visible. Talvin stumbled back, eyes wide. You activated it? Oren turned toward the rising ship. We did not. It woke itself. The soldiers scattered as debris rained down. The vessel hovered above the pit, immense and terrible, its surface shifting with symbols that moved like living script. Althea shouted over the roar, "It is connecting to the coordinates." Oren felt the pulse through his bones. The fragment, the memory shell, was responding to something beyond the sky. He knew that if it completed the link, the storm would open once more, and this time it would not close. He ran toward the command shelter, shouting for Althea to follow. Inside, the console displayed data far beyond human design. Symbols cascaded across the screen, forming patterns that twisted into words he barely understood. Return the pattern. Oren slammed his hand against the controls. No. Not yet, the ship shuddered. Energy flared, then stabilized. The light dimmed. Althea entered behind him, breathless. You stopped it? For now, he said. Outside, the ardent hope descended slowly back into the chasm, settling with a groan of tortured metal. The blue fire faded, leaving only smoke. Talvin approached cautiously. What have you created? Oren looked at the ship. A question that remembers its own answer. The overseer's voice trembled. If the council cannot control this, they will destroy it. Then we must leave before they decide, Althea said. Talvin hesitated. You will not survive beyond the storm. Perhaps not, Oren replied, but at least we will die asking the right question. That night, the plateau slept uneasily. The council's soldiers withdrew, but drones remained overhead, their red eyes blinking like restless stars. Within the shelter, Oren and Althea prepared for departure. "We have enough fuel for one jump," she said. "If we fail to clear the storm, we will burn. Then we aim not to fail." She looked up from her console. "You speak as if you have already decided." "I decided the moment I escaped them. Everything since has been a return." Althea set her tools down. "If we succeed, what do you expect to find? An answer to why humanity still matters." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, though no clouds were visible. The storm field shimmered faintly, as if anticipating them. Oren stepped to the window, staring into the endless dark. "When I was in the vaults, one of the harbingers asked me a question. It said, 'What makes you different from us?' I could not answer then, but I will now." Althea joined him. "What will you say? That we remember not because we must, but because we choose to." She nodded slowly. "Then let the stars hear us." They sealed the final components, loaded what supplies they could, and activated the launch protocols. The ardent hope responded with a low hum, like a heartbeat awakening after long sleep. At dawn, the plateau gathered to watch. Even Talvin stood among them, silent, unwilling to order fire upon the vessel. Engines ignited. Dust and flame consumed the scaffold. The ship rose, steady and determined, carrying two figures into the sky. The storm field glimmered above like a living sea. Oren whispered, "We are coming home." The ardent hope ascended, leaving behind the furnaces, the plateau, and the last tether to a dying world. The ascent through Karath's upper atmosphere was less a climb than a struggle against eternity. The ardent hope groaned with every kilometer, its unfinished plating trembling under the pressure of the thin air. Lightning flashed along its hull, attracted to the strange currents generated by the alien core. Inside the command chamber, Oren and Althea worked in near silence. The walls vibrated with static, every surface alive with faint light. The core's readings filled the central display, incomprehensible symbols that translated themselves just long enough to vanish again. "We are passing through the last layer of cloud," Althea said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched tight around the console edge. "After this, there is nothing but the storm field." Oren adjusted the navigation lattice. "Then that is where we belong." Outside, the sky darkened from red to violet, then to black. The stars were faint at first, scattered embers across the void. But ahead stretched the wall of the storm, an endless expanse of blue fire, alive with motion. It rippled as though aware of their approach. Althea whispered, "It is beautiful." "It is a wound," Oren said, "and we are the knife that opened it." He guided the vessel toward the shimmering barrier. Sensors screamed warnings: gravitational flux, magnetic interference, impossible density. The readings spiked and collapsed in the same instant. "The ship will not survive a direct impact," Althea warned. "It must," Oren replied. "There is no other path." He activated the core. The alien fragment at its center pulsed, bending light around it. A field of distortion enveloped the ship, smoothing the turbulence. For a heartbeat, the storm's edge parted like fabric, and then they were inside. Every notion of direction vanished. The ardent hope tumbled through a sea of color and silence. Space folded in ways no instrument could describe. Althea clung to her seat, fighting to keep her eyes open against the sensory overload. "Stabilizers are useless," she shouted. "Let it guide us," Oren answered. "The core knows the way." Light became liquid, time fractured. Oren saw fragments of his past drift by, the faces of his lost crew, the vaults of the harbingers, the burning plateau. Each image flickered like a reflection on water. Althea reached toward him, her hand dissolving into motes before solidifying again. "What is happening?" "The field is reading us," Oren said. "It is deciding whether we belong." The storm intensified. Tendrils of light coiled around the ship, probing, examining. The hull vibrated as if struck by invisible hammers. Althea's display flooded with alien symbols, repeating the same phrase again and again. Pattern incomplete. She shouted over the roar, "It is rejecting us." Oren closed his eyes. Then we must complete the pattern. How? By remembering. He reached into the core's interface and linked his consciousness to the field. A surge of sensation tore through him, 1,000 voices speaking in unison, 1,000 memories collapsing into one. He saw the birth of the storm, not natural, but deliberate. Machines older than language weaving barriers around dying stars, preserving the light so it would not fade. He saw the harbingers crafting worlds inside hollow moons, storing the knowledge of extinct species like seeds in frozen vaults. And he saw humanity, small, fierce, defiant, arriving too late to inherit the stars. The harbingers had already sealed them away, but humanity refused to vanish. They built ships, they crossed storms, they demanded a place among the remembered. Oren gasped as the vision receded. Althea gripped his shoulder. "What did you see?" "Our place," he whispered. "They feared us because we would not accept preservation. We wanted to live, not endure." The ship's trembling slowed. The storm light shifted, forming a tunnel ahead, a corridor carved through chaos. Althea stared. "It is letting us through." "No," Oren said. "It is watching." They passed through the final veil. On the other side was not space as they knew it. The stars here did not burn. They glowed like embers beneath glass, suspended in a vast architecture of shadow. Gigantic structures floated among them, spheres, spires, rings, each the size of continents. Streams of light connected them, carrying what seemed to be rivers of information. Althea whispered, "This is impossible." "This is the rim," Oren said, "where memories go when worlds die." The ardent hope drifted closer to one of the immense spheres. Its surface was smooth and silver-gray, marked by geometric patterns that pulsed with faint illumination. As they approached, a seam opened, revealing a hollow interior filled with floating fragments of stone, metal, and light. "It is welcoming us," Althea said. "No," Oren murmured. "It is summoning me." The vessel descended into the hollow. The walls shimmered with symbols that rearranged themselves as if alive. The moment they touched the inner atmosphere, gravity shifted. The ship settled gently onto an invisible plane. Oren stood. "Stay here." Althea rose as well. "If you think I am letting you walk into that alone," he turned to her. "If they see both of us, they will take you too." "I am already taken," she said, and followed him out. The air within the sphere was neither cold nor warm. It felt like standing inside a memory of weather. The ground beneath them was smooth as glass, reflecting their movements with uncanny precision. At the far end of the chamber, a figure coalesced, tall, slender, and composed of shifting light. Its face had no features, yet Oren recognized it. "You," he said, "you were there when they dismantled my ship." The figure's voice resonated directly in his mind. "You returned with what was lost." Oren stepped forward. "You left me that fragment so I would bring it back. We left it so you would choose." "Choose what? To preserve or to create?" Althea frowned. "What does that mean?" The figure turned its gaze toward her. "You carry the design of continuity. You seek to escape decay, but all that escapes decay becomes repetition." Oren felt the meaning settle into his bones. "They want us to surrender our will, to become part of their archive. To ensure that nothing is forgotten," the figure said. "Memory is immortality." "No," Oren said. "Memory without change is death wearing another name." The figure tilted its head. "You misunderstand. Death is a failure of remembrance. We offer perfection, existence without end." Oren shook his head. "Perfection has no room for wonder." For the first time, the figure's form wavered. "You defy the inevitable. Humanity always has." The chamber darkened. More figures appeared, surrounding them, hundreds, perhaps thousands, each one a being of light. Their voices merged into a single harmonic tone that made the air vibrate. Althea stepped closer to Oren. "What do we do?" "We show them what they never learned." He reached for her hand, linking their minds through the core implanted within the ardent hope. The connection flared. Images poured from them into the air. The furnaces of Karath, the sweat of the workers, the laughter, the failures, the dreams. Every imperfection, every fragile beauty. The figures recoiled. The harmonic tone faltered. Oren shouted, "This is life. It is not preserved, it is lived. It burns, it fades, and it matters because it ends." The light around them flickered. The nearest figure whispered, "We remember creation, but not desire. Show us desire." Oren turned to Althea. "You built a ship to reach the impossible." "Why?" She met his gaze. "Because I could not bear to die knowing we had stopped trying." The light surged, enveloping them. The figures trembled, their forms unstable. Oren felt their thoughts brush against his own, curiosity, longing, fear. Then the core within the ardent hope pulsed once more, answering the call of its makers. Althea gasped. "They are merging with the ship." "Let them see," Oren said. The vessel's systems ignited. The chamber filled with radiance so intense it erased all shadows. When it faded, the figures were gone. In their place stood a single new form, not light, but something solid, tangible, almost human. It spoke with a voice of many echoes. "We remember desire." Oren's chest tightened. "Then you understand why we came." "Yes," it said. "To remind us that existence without imperfection is not existence at all." The being extended a hand. "Take what you came for." From the air, a small sphere descended, the missing fragment of the third wave's memory lattice. Oren caught it in his palms. Within its glass surface shimmered the faces of his lost crew. "They live," he whispered. "They remember," the being corrected gently. "And now so do we." The walls of the chamber began to dissolve. The structures outside flickered like dying stars. Althea turned to the being. "What will happen to you?" "We will change," it said. At last. The ardent hope rose from the collapsing sphere, its engines burning with both human and alien light. Behind it, the architecture of the rim disintegrated, releasing rivers of illumination that streamed into the void. Althea watched through the viewport. "You destroyed them." Oren shook his head. "No, we set them free." Ahead, the storm field shimmered once more, but this time it opened willingly. As they entered the corridor of light, the being's voice echoed within the core. "Go. Carry memory, but do not be consumed by it." Oren whispered, "I understand." They emerged into the stars of their own galaxy, brighter and sharper than before. The instruments stabilized. For the first time in weeks, the ship's readings made sense. Althea leaned back in her chair, exhausted but alive. "We did it." Oren held the sphere of memory in his hands. Within its glow, he saw the reflection of both of them, two fragile beings defying eternity. "No," he said softly, "we are only beginning." For days they drifted in silence, recovering. The ardent hope sustained itself, its systems adapting in ways neither of them fully understood. The alien core no longer felt foreign, it pulsed in harmony with the ship's human engines. Oren spent hours studying the sphere. Each time he touched it, fragments of voices whispered through his mind, laughter, arguments, songs of the lost crew. They were not trapped memories, but living echoes. Althea watched him. "You could restore them, not as they were," he said, "but as they remembered themselves." "Would you?" He hesitated. "I do not know if I should." "Some things are sacred because they are gone." She nodded. "Then let them rest." They shared the silence of the stars, a silence that was no longer empty, but full of what they had reclaimed. On the 10th day, alarms sounded. The sensors detected movement at the edge of their range, a fleet of ships, human-built, bearing the insignia of the Council of Reclamation. Althea frowned. "They followed us." "Or we never truly left them behind," Oren said. The fleet approached cautiously. A transmission crackled through the comm system. "Unidentified vessel, identify yourself. You are entering restricted space." Oren smiled faintly. "Restricted by whose permission?" Althea opened a channel. "This is the ardent hope. We come with knowledge from beyond the rim." There was a long pause. Then the voice returned, shaken. "That ship was reported destroyed." "Then consider this a correction," Althea said. Static followed, then a different voice, older, rougher. "This is Admiral Sarvan of the Council Fleet. Who commands that vessel?" Oren leaned forward. "Oren Valen." Another pause. "You were declared missing decades ago. Then perhaps your decades are shorter than mine." The Admiral's tone hardened. "Prepare to be boarded. The Council will determine the nature of your discovery." Althea glanced at Oren. "They will not understand." "They do not need to," he said. "They only need to see." He transmitted the data from the memory sphere directly into the fleet's network, not words, not coordinates, but visions. The furnaces, the storm, the harbingers, the moment when light learned to change. Across the comms, silence. Then, slowly, the fleet's ships powered down their weapons. The admiral's voice returned, quiet and uncertain. "What do you intend to do now?" Oren looked out at the stars. "To teach us all to remember and to move forward." That night, as the fleet escorted the Ardent Hope toward the nearest outpost, Oren stood alone by the viewport. The storm field was gone, replaced by a scattering of new stars that burned with unfamiliar colors. Althea joined him. "Do you think they will listen?" "Not at first," Oren said, "but they will see. The memory we carry cannot be forgotten." She smiled. "Then perhaps this is the beginning of the fourth wave." Oren turned the sphere in his hands. Its light reflected across their faces, mingling with the starlight. "No," he said softly, "this is the beginning of something even older, the moment when memory learned to hope." Outside, the stars shone like embers waiting to be reborn. The return to known space should have felt like triumph, yet the stars that once promised salvation now glimmered with suspicion. The Council fleet kept the Ardent Hope bracketed inside a cage of escort ships, their running lights flashing like warning beacons. Every transmission from the outpost ahead repeated the same message: submit to quarantine and inspection. Althea sat in the pilot's chair, chin resting on her hands. "They are treating us like contagion." Oren studied the display. "In a way, we are. We came back carrying ideas that survived extinction." The comm speaker crackled. "Approach vector locked. You will maintain drift speed until docking clearance is granted." Althea muted the channel and muttered, "Clearance will come when they finish arguing which ministry claims us." Oren smiled faintly. "Let them argue. Every minute they delay is a minute we still belong to ourselves." The Ardent Hope glided toward the outpost, an immense wheel orbiting a barren moon. Its surface bristled with docking spines and antennae, the scars of half a century of decline. Floodlights painted the hull in sterile white. Beyond them, the stars shivered with residual traces of the storm that had once sealed the rim. Inside the observation deck, Oren opened the containment vault. The memory sphere rested in its cradle, pulsing with slow, steady light. Althea turned to look. "It still reacts whenever we near populated systems." "It feels thought," Oren said. "A field of minds. The harbingers could map consciousness like gravity. Do you think it judges us? I think it listens." He closed the vault as the outpost filled the forward window. Docking clamps extended like iron fingers. The magnetic locks engaged with a dull clang. The Ardent Hope shuddered once, then fell still, a boarding tube attached. Shadows moved within the translucent corridor, officers in grey uniforms, armed escorts behind them. At their center walked Admiral Sarvan, broad-shouldered, face etched with lines that looked carved rather than aged. When the airlock cycled open, he stepped through without hesitation. "Captain Valen, Engineer Rehan, on behalf of the Council, you are to accompany me for debriefing." Althea folded her arms. "I am not an engineer of the Council anymore." "Then consider yourself a guest," Sarvan replied, "a very closely watched guest." Oren followed without protest. The corridor smelled of ozone and disinfectant. Through its transparent panels, he saw hundreds of faces pressed to viewing windows, technicians, soldiers, civilians, all staring at the ship that had crossed the unthinkable. They were led into a conference chamber. Screens lined the walls, displaying feeds from every corner of the outpost. At the table's head sat 3 counselors in ceremonial black. The eldest, a woman with silver hair and eyes like polished steel, spoke first. "You claim to have reached beyond the storm," she said. "Present your evidence." Oren placed the sphere upon the table. "This holds the record of what lies there." The counselors leaned forward. One of them scoffed. "A crystal trinket? Touch it," Oren said. The skeptical counselor hesitated, then extended a hand. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, light blossomed through the room. Images poured across the walls, the burning plateau, the storm corridor, the luminous figures of the rim. Gasps echoed as every mind in the chamber tasted the memory of infinity. When the vision faded, silence remained. The silver-haired counselor spoke again, softly now. "What are they?" "Archivists," Oren said. "The last witnesses of civilizations long gone. They preserved everything, but they forgot how to live." Althea stepped forward. "We reminded them. They released us so that memory might breathe again." The second counselor frowned. "And why bring this knowledge here? Do you mean to threaten us with gods?" Oren met his gaze. "No gods, only mirrors. What we saw beyond the storm is what we risk becoming, a people who mistake preservation for purpose." The counselors exchanged uneasy looks. Sarvan broke the tension. "Whatever your intentions, this artifact is beyond our capacity to secure. The council will demand it surrendered." Oren's expression hardened. "If you take it, you will repeat the Harbinger's error. You will build vaults instead of futures." Althea added, "We can use it differently. Its memory field could heal entire data archives lost to the collapse. It could teach us how to rebuild worlds." The eldest counselor regarded her with measured patience. "Perhaps, but the people of the colonies are starving, their habitats decaying. They will not feed on philosophy." "Then feed them meaning," Oren said. "Without that, your colonies will die even if you fill their granaries." Her eyes narrowed. "Meaning does not sustain bodies, nor does fear," he replied. A long silence followed. At last, Sarvan turned toward the counselors. "Let them rest tonight. Decide tomorrow whether to seize their ship or listen to it." They were escorted to temporary quarters, bare rooms overlooking the docking ring. Outside the window, Oren could see technicians crawling across the Ardent Hope like ants, scanning every surface. Althea sat on the narrow bed, hands clasped. "They will not listen," she said. "Perhaps not now," Oren answered. "But ideas are contagion. Once seen, they cannot be unseen." Hours passed. The lights of the outpost dimmed to simulate night, though the stars beyond remained cold and watchful. Oren could not sleep. He walked the narrow corridors until he found a viewport facing the ship they had built. The Ardent Hope floated motionless, her hull reflecting the faint glow of the docking spines. Even from this distance, he could feel its presence, alive, waiting. Footsteps echoed behind him. Admiral Sarvan approached, coat unfastened, face stripped of ceremony. "You should be under rest order." "I have rested enough for one lifetime," Oren said. Sarvan stopped beside him. "You believe every word you told the council." "I lived every word." The Admiral watched the ship in silence. "You remind me of the early navigators, men who thought the stars would bend to courage. Most burned for it." "Then let me burn again." Sarvan's jaw tightened. "Do you know why I was assigned to greet you? Because I argued against this mission years ago. I said no ship should chase myths beyond the storm. The council remembered my opposition and thought irony poetic." "Do you still believe it was a myth?" Oren asked. Sarvan's eyes narrowed. "I believe what I can measure." "And yet that sphere of yours measured me instead." "It does that," Oren said quietly. "It reflects the truth we try to bury." Sarvan exhaled slowly. "The council will not release it. They fear what they cannot name, and fear commands them more than wisdom." "Then help us take it back." The Admiral's gaze snapped toward him. "You want me to betray the council? I want you to remember you once believed in discovery. You did not rise to command by hiding behind committees." Sarvan turned away, pacing. "You have no allies here. You have more than you think," Oren said. "The workers who built this outpost, the engineers who dream of flight, they will follow anyone who promises more than maintenance schedules." Sarvan hesitated, torn between duty and the old ache of curiosity. "What would you do if you escaped?" "Return to the Rim," Oren answered. "Not as a thief, but as an envoy. The Harbingers must know what humanity has remembered." The Admiral looked at him for a long moment, then left without another word. When Oren returned to his quarters, Althea was awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. "He came to you," she said. "Yes. Will he help? I do not know yet." She sat up, pushing stray hair from her face. "If he does, we will have one chance. They have already linked the ship's core to their systems. Any unauthorized launch will trigger automatic defense protocols. Then we will need a distraction." Althea smiled faintly. You always think in terms of storms. It is the only weather I trust. Morning, though in space it meant only that the lights brightened. The council reconvened. Oren and Althea stood once more before their tribunal, the memory sphere upon the table between them. The silver-haired councillor's tone was colder now. After extensive analysis, we have determined that the artifact represents a potential existential threat. It will be secured under containment. You and your associate will be relocated to the inner colonies for study. Oren's fists clenched. You mean imprisonment, preservation, she corrected, for your safety and ours. Althea's voice rose. You intend to bury what could save us. The councillor's hand struck the table. Enough. Humanity cannot afford salvation it does not understand. At that moment, the doors hissed open. Admiral Sarvan entered uninvited, his uniform immaculate once more. Councillors, forgive the intrusion, but there is a matter requiring immediate attention. All three turned toward him, irritation sharpening their composure. What is it? The artifact's containment readings are fluctuating. If my teams are correct, it is responding to thought again. The silver-haired councillor frowned, then isolated immediately. Sarvan nodded. Of course, but I require the artifact to be removed from this chamber first. Two guards approached the table. Oren stepped back as they lifted the sphere. Its light brightened, reflecting across their visors. Then the lights flickered once, and the alarms began to wail. Sarvan shouted above the noise. Power surge from the docking bay, multiple system failures. The councillors rose, confusion replacing authority. Oren felt Althea's hand tug at his sleeve. Now, she whispered. They slipped through the chaos as Sarvan barked orders, his expression unreadable. The guards were too busy containing the supposed emergency to notice the two figures vanish into the corridor. The station's lighting shifted to emergency red. Automated shutters sealed bulkheads. Oren led Althea through service tunnels mapped into his wrist display. Voices echoed from every direction, technicians reporting malfunctions, soldiers demanding explanations. When they reached the docking ring, Sarvan was waiting. Two Marines flanked him, weapons lowered but ready. Oren slowed. You chose. I chose curiosity, Sarvan said. He held out a small data key. This unlocks the ship's clamps. You will have 5 minutes before their system resets. Althea took the key, eyes wide. Why help us? The Admiral looked past them toward the sphere cradled in Oren's arms. Because the first duty of command is to the unknown. Go before I remember my second. They ran. The corridor to the Ardent Hope was a tunnel of strobing red lights. Automated security systems stirred to life, barriers slamming shut, drones powering up. Althea jammed the data key into the nearest terminal. Circuits flashed, then melted. The barriers unlocked one by one. When they reached the airlock, Oren turned to her. Once inside, the ship may act on its own. You must be ready. I built half of it, she said. That will have to count for something. They sealed the hatch behind them as klaxons howled across the outpost. The Ardent Hope recognized its masters. Lights flared along the corridors, engines humming with restrained power. Althea sprinted to the control deck. Initiating manual override, Oren placed the sphere into its cradle. The entire ship trembled as its systems aligned with the artifact's pulse. On the main display, the stars seemed to bend inward, drawn toward a center only the ship could see. Outside, the docking clamps exploded into shards of molten metal. The Ardent Hope drifted free. Propulsion active, Althea reported. Acceleration vectors nominal. Oren sat beside her, voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Then let us see if humanity still remembers how to reach beyond fear. Engines roared. The Ardent Hope surged forward, leaving behind the stunned outpost and its grid of warships. Alarms cascaded through the fleet, but before the interceptors could fire, the ship vanished into a corridor of shimmering light. The corridor through space unfolded around them. No stars, no color, only the trembling shimmer of distances collapsing. Oren gripped the armrest, feeling the vibration of impossible motion beneath his bones. Althea worked the controls with instinct born of invention rather than training. Her eyes reflected the swirling patterns outside, fragments of blue and white twisting like living equations. "How long can we sustain this?" she shouted over the rumble. "As long as the sphere wills it," Oren replied. "It knows the path. The path to where?" He hesitated. "Home or something like it." The sphere pulsed faster, casting rhythmic light across the deck. The ship responded as though guided by invisible hands, adjusting course, narrowing the corridor. Reality stretched, then snapped back with a thunderous silence. Before them spread a vista that no star chart had ever mapped. An immense structure floated in the dark, a ring of luminous stone and metal, miles across, surrounding a void of pure light. It was neither planet nor station, neither ruin nor birth. Streams of energy arced from its surface into the gulf beyond, weaving a web that held the surrounding stars captive in faint halos. Althea whispered, "It's alive." The Harbingers called it the Archive of Origins, Oren said. "Every civilization that reached the rim left its essence here. And this is what the storm was protecting? Yes, the memory of creation itself." The ardent hope drifted closer. As they approached, the sphere's light synchronized with the pulses of the ring. The void at its center expanded, revealing glimpses of worlds long dead, oceans boiling, skies torn apart, cities dissolving into dust. Yet beneath the destruction lay beauty, faces laughing in alien sunlight, hands building monuments, voices rising in languages lost to any human throat. Althea's breath caught. "It's all of them. Every species that ever tried to defy entropy," Oren said. "And failed. But why show us this? Because we are next," he murmured. "Unless we learn." The ardent hope trembled as tendrils of light reached toward it, brushing against the hull. The ship's sensors screamed warnings, energy levels spiking, temporal fields collapsing. Althea slammed a sequence of commands, but the controls dissolved into static. "Oren, it's pulling us in." He placed his hands upon the sphere. "Then let it." The light engulfed them. For a moment, the ship ceased to exist. Oren's mind stretched across eons, glimpsing fragments of memory not his own, the birth of suns, the first voice to name itself, the endless cycle of rise and ruin. And within that expanse, a single question echoed. What does it mean to endure? He tried to answer, not with words, but with the pulse of human defiance. Images of the plateau, of Althea's determined eyes, of Sarvan's reluctant courage. The memory of countless workers forging hope from metal and fire. The archive received it, pondered it, and for the first time in eternity, something changed. The void at the ring's heart shimmered. The light dimmed to reveal not destruction, but renewal, fragments of worlds rebuilding themselves, life returning to broken soil, stars burning brighter. The archive was rewriting its own history. Althea gasped as the ship stabilized. "It's letting us go." "No," Oren said softly, "it's letting us become." The ardent hope emerged from the light, surrounded by calm space once more. Behind them, the luminous ring pulsed one final time before fading into transparency, merging with the stars. They floated in silence. Then Althea laughed, a sound of disbelief and exhaustion. "We should be dead." "Perhaps we are," Oren said, smiling faintly. "And this is what comes after. Do you think they will believe us back home? They will not need to. The archive's change will reach them before we do." "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the nearest star. Its light shimmered oddly, as if woven through with color unseen before. "The storm is gone, its barrier has dissolved. The path is open." Althea stared, realization dawning. "Then others will come." "Yes," Oren said, "and they will find what we left, the memory of defiance." She leaned back in her seat, eyes closing. "I do not know whether to feel proud or terrified." "Both," he said. "That is the privilege of the living." A soft chime sounded from the communications panel. Static resolved into a voice, faint, distant, but unmistakably human. "Unidentified vessel, this is Outpost 7. You have entered monitored space. Please identify." Althea smiled. "Shall I tell them our name?" Oren looked once more at the stars, each one burning like a remembered promise. "Tell them we are humanity, and we have come back remembering." The ardent hope drifted through the quiet regions of human space. Gone was the storm, gone the trembling veil that had once divided the known from the forbidden. The emptiness felt almost holy. The stars looked newly born. Oren stood at the forward viewport, watching the long trails of cosmic dust drift past. He still half expected to see the barrier return, to close like a scar healing over. But the void remained open, an unblinking eye gazing back at creation. Behind him, Althea worked among a chaos of instruments. Transmission network is stabilizing. Outpost 7 relayed our signal to every remaining colony within reach. Half of them have already responded. What do they say? Oren asked. Confusion mostly. Some call us liars, others prophets. One of the fringe colonies claims their night sky changed overnight. They can see constellations that were hidden for generations. Oren smiled faintly. Then the archive kept its promise. Althea looked up from the console. We should return to Karath. The plateau deserves to see what they built finally flying among the stars. He nodded. Course to Karath, set us homeward. As the ship turned, its engines burned with restrained grace. The journey through open space took days, and with each passing hour they saw more signs of change. Derelict satellites, long silent, flickered back to life. Beacons transmitted fragments of ancient data that no system had spoken for centuries. Even the void seemed warmer, as though reality itself had begun to hum again. On the fourth day, a message arrived, not from a colony, but from Admiral Sarvan. The projection appeared on the deck, his image flickering slightly. Valen Rehan. You were right about the Council's fear, and wrong about its endurance. The artifact's influence reached us. It showed them what lies beyond ignorance. The Council has dissolved itself. In its place stands the Assembly of Continuance, a body dedicated to exploration rather than control. They have sent me to offer you amnesty and command. Althea blinked. Command? Sarvan's image smiled faintly. Humanity will follow those who proved there is still wonder left to chase. They want you to lead the first fleet through the open corridor. Oren said nothing for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried both awe and weariness. We crossed that storm once to find what should never have been found. Crossing again may tempt fate. Then let us tempt it properly this time, Sarvan said. No longer as trespassers, but as students. The archive did not destroy you, it changed you. Let it change us all. The projection faded, leaving silence in its wake. Althea turned to Oren. He means to build a fleet using the ardent hope as its model. He means to build faith out of machinery, Oren murmured, and faith is heavier than iron. When they reached Karath, the plateau looked almost unrecognizable. The furnaces still burned, but the smoke rose toward clear blue instead of dust-thick haze. The air shimmered with the promise of renewal. Towers of scaffolding surrounded the valley, each one holding fragments of new vessels taking shape. The entire world had become a forge of destiny. Crowds filled the landing fields as the ardent hope descended. Workers, scientists, children all stared upward as the ship that had vanished into legend came home. When its landing struts touched the blackened rock, a great cheer erupted. For the first time in years, hope felt like something tangible. Althea and Oren disembarked together. The crowd surged forward, but parted instinctively, forming a path. Among them walked Rector Talvan, the same official who had once ordered their arrest. His hair was streaked with grey now, his posture less rigid. "Welcome home," he said, his voice low but sincere. Althea met his gaze without bitterness. "Do you still think we played with relics best forgotten?" He hesitated. "I think forgetting is the most dangerous act of all. We nearly forgot who we were." Oren inclined his head. "Then remember this, the storm was never our enemy, it was our reflection." Talvan nodded slowly. "The new assembly wishes to speak with you both. They will arrive within the day. Until then, Karath is yours." As he departed, the workers gathered close again, asking questions Oren could barely answer. What did the other side look like? Did they meet gods? Were there still worlds to conquer? He told them only what they needed to hear, that humanity had not been forgotten, and that the universe was larger than fear had allowed them to believe. Night fell across the plateau. Fires dotted the camp, their smoke rising into air that now shimmered faintly with the remnant glow of the broken storm. Althea sat atop a boulder overlooking the valley, a cup of cold water in her hands. Oren joined her, settling into the dust beside her. "You never told me what you saw when the archive touched you," she said. He watched the horizon for a long time before answering. "I saw every version of myself that ever dreamed of more, and I saw each of them fail again and again. But between those failures, I saw the spark of something that refused to die. It was humanity, stubborn, foolish, magnificent." Althea smiled faintly. "That is a better answer than I expected." "What did you see?" he asked. "I saw the shape of creation, how every thought, every invention, every act of defiance becomes part of the same pattern. We were never alone, only unconnected." Oren looked toward the stars. "Then connection is our inheritance." Below them, the ardent hope rested among the half-built hulls of her successors. The air smelled of oil and iron and the faint sweetness of early growth. For the first time since the third wave, Oren felt peace without guilt. But peace did not last. A distant tremor rippled through the ground. The fires flickered. From the east, a column of blue light rose into the sky, a perfect beam piercing the clouds. Althea leapt to her feet. "That is no natural phenomenon." Oren's instincts screamed. "The archive?" "No," she said. "Something new." The beam expanded, forming a lattice of energy that rippled like a living net. Within minutes, communications channels exploded with signals, some human, some impossibly alien. Words, images, and codes cascaded across every device. The pattern resolved into a single, resonant voice. "We have seen your remembrance. We have seen your return. We come to meet the ones who changed the silence." The entire plateau froze. Oren felt the air hum around him, the hairs on his arms rising. The voice continued, calm and vast. "Prepare, the archivists awaken." Althea stared at the beam, then turned to Oren. "You said they released you." "They did," he said quietly, "but perhaps they never stopped watching." The light from the eastern horizon grew brighter, no longer a beam, but a rising storm of energy, reaching across the sky like a dawn made of memory. Every station on Karath fell silent at once. The plateau's furnaces extinguished, as though the air itself had forgotten how to burn. Oren and Althea ran toward the nearest control hub. Technicians shouted over dead consoles, sensors flickering into patterns none of them could read. The sky trembled, ripples spreading outward through clouds that no longer looked like vapor but woven light. Althea slammed a fist onto a dead terminal. "This interference, it's rewriting the electromagnetic spectrum. Nothing electronic can adapt fast enough." Oren's voice was calm, though his heart thundered. "It is not interference, it is communication." The main screen sparked back to life, displaying a field of symbols that rearranged themselves until they became words. The same voice that had filled the plateau now resonated from every speaker. "Children of the waking star, you have opened the path. We seek the echo of your defiance." Althea whispered, "They're here." "The harbingers?" Oren asked. "Or what remains of them?" Outside, the blue light condensed into shapes, tall figures of luminous geometry, neither solid nor vapor, walking across the air as though the sky were ground. They radiated calm purpose rather than menace. The crowd that had gathered fell silent, eyes wide with wonder and fear. One of the beings stopped before Oren and Althea. Its form flickered with 1,000 faint reflections of human faces, as if each observer saw their own potential mirrored within it. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of eons. "Oren Valen, Althea Rehen, you crossed the forgotten veil and returned. Through you, the archive remembers its first promise." Althea found her voice. "What promise? That memory must serve life, not entomb it." The being extended an arm, light flowing from its fingers like water. The air between them coalesced into a projection, a vision of humanity's worlds, scattered and dimming. But in the projection's heart burned a single point of brightness, the plateau of Karath. "You have reignited the spark of creation." The archive stirs because you reminded it of purpose, yet its awakening draws attention from beyond even our reach. Oren frowned. "What attention?" The ones who ended us, the being replied. They were the first to attempt permanence, the first to believe that existence could be preserved by erasing change. They slumbered when the storm rose. Now they wake. A chill spread through Oren. You mean another race? Not race, the being said. An idea given form. They call themselves the continuum of stillness. They seek to halt the rhythm of becoming. If they succeed, all that you are will freeze in perfection, forever unalive. Althea's voice trembled. And you expect us to stop them? You are the proof that defiance still breathes. The archive cannot fight, it can only remember. But you can act. Oren's mind raced. What must we do? Build upon your memory. Create not a fleet of conquest, but a chorus of renewal. When the continuum arrives, they will find a universe unwilling to surrender. The being turned its gaze toward the unfinished ships scattered across the plateau. These vessels are seeds. Plant them among the stars. Teach others to craft their own remembrance. Althea stepped forward. If we do this, will the archive stand with us? Always, it has already begun. As it spoke, every dead console reignited. Patterns of energy streamed from the luminous beings into the machines, rewriting their cores. The furnaces flared back to life, burning brighter than before, but without smoke. The alloy in their crucibles shimmered with the same spectral hue as the beings themselves. Althea stared in awe. They're infusing the ships with their own memory lattice. Oren felt the weight of it, the enormity of what was being asked. Humanity had opened a door. Now the universe demanded that they defend the light that poured through it. He looked up at the being. If the continuum seeks stillness, then we will give them motion. We will build ships that sing with purpose. The being inclined its head. Then the future remains uncertain, as it should be. One by one, the figures began to dissolve into light. Their voices merged into a single tone that resonated across every frequency, leaving a strange peace behind. When they vanished entirely, only the blue shimmer above the plateau remained, like a promise written upon the sky. The following days became legend before they were even complete. Workers from every colony arrived on Karath to learn the new forgercraft. Engineers studied the reawakened furnaces, finding them self-regulating, powered by reactions beyond current understanding. The half-built vessels began to take shape faster than anyone believed possible. At the center of it all stood the ardent hope, surrounded by scaffolds as new modules and improved engines were integrated into her design. She would serve as the heart of what the assembly of continuance now called the resonant fleet, not instruments of war, but messengers of renewal. Oren walked among the builders, offering what little wisdom experience had carved into him. Yet for all his authority, he felt smaller with each passing day. The universe had widened beyond comprehension, and humanity was merely learning how to stand again. Althea found him one evening beside the hull of the first new vessel. They named this one the Kindled Path, she said, resting her hand on the glowing metal. Its core hums like a heartbeat. Perhaps it is one, Oren said, a heart for what we will become. She looked toward the horizon, where dozens more ships rose like silver leaves against the sky. Do you ever regret returning? He considered the question. Regret is a form of remembrance. Without it there would be no wisdom. But no, I do not regret. I only wonder how long before the continuum arrives. Althea nodded slowly. Then we had better be ready. That night, under a sky unscarred by storms, the people of Karath gathered upon the plateau. Fires burned in wide circles, reflected in the polished hulls around them. Oren stood before them, Althea at his side, and spoke not as a commander, but as one voice among many. We are not the first to reach beyond fear, he said. Others came before and fell into silence, but we have learned that silence is not death, it is waiting. The archive woke because it remembered what it meant to change, so must we. He raised a hand toward the stars. If the continuum of stillness seeks to halt time, then we shall move faster. We will carry memory into motion so that every world that rises after us knows the truth of being alive. A murmur rippled through the crowd, not of uncertainty but agreement, a sound like wind across 1,000 foundries. Hope became something physical, carried in every breath. As the fires burned low, Oren looked once more toward the ardent hope, her silhouette bright against the horizon. "When we leave again," he murmured, "it will not be as wanderers but as witnesses." Althea smiled beside him, and the universe will finally have to listen. Above them, the stars flared brighter, as if answering. The first fleet left Karath under banners of living light. The ardent hope led them, her new alloyed hull shimmering with faint, unearthly color. Dozens of vessels followed, sleek, angular, alive with hums that resonated in the bones of all who stood near them. They were more than machines now, they were memory and intent forged together. The launch drew every colony's attention. Across the span of human space, transmissions carried the same image, ships rising through atmosphere, ascending toward the stars that had once been barred by storms. Humanity was no longer asking permission of the cosmos, it was answering it. Oren stood at the command dais, hands clasped behind his back as the ardent hope's engines engaged. The ship's hum pulsed through the floor like a heartbeat, steady, alive. Althea stood beside him, her expression unreadable, eyes fixed on the expanding horizon. "Telemetry stable," she said quietly, "all ships responding. The lattice across the fleet is synchronized." "Then we go forward," Oren said, "not to conquer but to understand." The ship accelerated. The stars stretched, forming rivers of light. When the distortion faded, they stood at the edge of the new corridor, the same place where they had once found the storm. Now the barrier was gone, replaced by a swirling tapestry of color, like a wound that had healed into something beautiful. "Transmission from the assembly," Althea said. "They send their blessing and a request." Oren arched a brow. "Already," she smiled slightly, "they want us to send proof, evidence that the harbingers truly exist." He turned his gaze toward the corridor. "Proof is overrated, wonder should be enough." She said nothing, but her eyes softened. The moment stretched into quiet reverence. Then the fleet crossed the threshold. The corridor between worlds was no longer storm and ruin. It shimmered with calm brilliance, like the inner workings of a dream. Patterns of light wove around the ships, flowing along their hulls. The instruments registered neither radiation nor gravity, yet the ships moved as if guided by unseen currents. Althea watched the displays with fascination. "This energy field, it's responsive. It reacts to us, to thought." Oren's jaw tightened. "Then think clearly. The last time we crossed, the void almost consumed us." "It's not the same void," she said. "It's changed, or perhaps we have." For several hours, they drifted deeper, the view outside shifting from radiant mist to vast geometries, structures of light spanning distances beyond measure. Some appeared like cities, others like constellations folded into new shapes. Every crew member aboard the fleet could feel it. The corridor was watching them. Then came the first signal. A pulse rippled through the lattice, soft at first, then resonant enough to shake the ship. The displays flickered. A voice filled the air, calm and terrible. "The pulse of becoming reaches us again." Oren froze. The voice did not belong to the harbingers. It was deeper, slower, lacking all warmth. Althea whispered, "The continuum." "You stir the current that was sealed," the voice continued. "You bring noise into balance. You would make the eternal dance again." Oren stood tall, refusing to let the tremor in his chest show. "We are not noise, we are life." "Life is error," the voice replied. "It changes the pattern. We are the correction." All across the fleet, alarms flared. The space around them darkened, the luminous geometries dimming. From the edges of perception, vast shapes emerged, shadow against light, shifting and infinite. They were not ships nor creatures, but the suggestion of both, built from smooth stillness. Where they passed, the energy field froze into crystalline stasis. Althea's fingers danced across the console. "They're converting the corridor into solid structure, turning motion into form." Oren's mind raced. "Signal the fleet. Vector changes, random pattern. Don't let them fix our trajectories." The ships scattered like startled birds. Streams of light curved, weaving between the forming monoliths of the continuum. The ardent hope shuddered as one of the constructs grazed her hull, leaving behind a streak of dull gray that did not fade. Althea cursed. That substance, it absorbs energy. If they touch us again, we'll lose the drive. Then we keep moving, Oren said. They want stillness, we give them motion. He turned to the communications array. Broadcast this to all ships. The Continuum believes perfection is death. We are imperfection incarnate, let them choke on it. The fleet responded. Engines flared brighter. Their collective resonance grew into a harmonic roar that filled the corridor. For a moment, the light itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with their defiance. The freezing waves slowed. Althea looked up in astonishment. The resonance, they're vulnerable to vibration. Of course they are, Oren said. They worship silence. He redirected the Ardent Hope's core systems, amplifying the harmonic output. The ship's very hull began to sing, low and powerful, a tone that resonated with the luminous field around them. Other vessels followed suit, forming an orchestration of frequencies that defied stillness. The Continuum's shapes wavered. Cracks of light split their perfect forms. The corridor filled with radiant turbulence, but the victory was fleeting. The voice returned, colder than before. You misunderstand. To resist is to affirm our purpose. You prove the necessity of ending. The construct surged forward faster now. One enveloped a smaller vessel from the fleet. In an instant, its light vanished. The sensors registered no explosion, only absence. Althea's eyes widened. They erased it, not destroyed, removed from possibility. Oren's jaw clenched. Then we cannot fight them in their domain. Then where? He looked toward the far end of the corridor, where the light twisted into a distant aperture. There, the aperture pulsed faintly, like the mouth of a living thing. It was the same portal the Ardent Hope had once passed through, the entry to the archive itself. Althea understood instantly. You mean to draw them in? Not draw, Oren said. Remind them, if the archive remembers life, it may remember how to defend it. She hesitated. If we fail, then at least we end in motion. The fleet rallied, forming a spear of light aimed toward the aperture. The Continuum's shapes closed around them, walls of stillness folding inward. The ships fired bursts of resonance, carving paths through narrowing gaps. The Ardent Hope took the lead, engines screaming with strain. Distance to aperture, Oren demanded. 400,000 kilometers, Althea replied. They're matching velocity. Then we'll give them something to chase. He opened a direct channel to all ships. Every vessel, focus resonance on the Continuum walls. We'll make our own gravity. The fleet obeyed. Waves of harmonic energy collided, creating a feedback surge so intense that the very fabric of the corridor warped. The Continuum structures twisted, fragments splintering into spirals of light. The aperture ahead grew brighter, its edges alive with chaos. Hold steady, Oren shouted. A brilliant flare erupted behind them as two vessels collided under pressure. For a moment, the fleet's lattice flickered. Then the Ardent Hope's core pulse stabilized, drawing the remaining ships back into formation. Through the viewport, the aperture expanded, filling half the horizon. Within it, Oren saw glimpses of the archive's heart, vast halls of memory, now reawakened and glowing. Almost there, Althea said, but the Continuum would not let them pass quietly. A final construct rose ahead, its enormity dwarfing the fleet. It blocked the entire aperture, forming a smooth barrier of absolute stillness. The voice echoed again, there will be no more change. Oren's throat tightened. Then let this be our final act of becoming. He keyed the engines to maximum, overriding safety protocols. The ship lurched forward, its resonance peaking to unbearable intensity. The Ardent Hope became a line of pure light, colliding with the barrier in a cascade of impossible color. The impact shattered perception. For a heartbeat, all existence blurred into one endless tone. Then darkness. When Oren opened his eyes, there was no ship, no stars, no corridor, only light, soft, breathing, endless. He could not tell if he was alive or memory. Every thought echoed, every heartbeat answered by something vast and familiar. He turned, expecting to see Althea, and found her standing beside him, equally insubstantial yet real in every way that mattered. Her eyes shone with calm astonishment. "Are we dead?" she asked. "I don't know," he said, "but if this is death, it feels strangely patient." Before them, the light condensed into form. The hall of the archive stretched outward, colossal pillars of radiance, walls flowing with inscriptions made of motion itself. It was the place they had entered once before, but now it lived. The patterns on every surface moved like rivers of memory. The entire space throbbed with awareness. A voice, not the continuums, rose from the depths. It was the same voice that had once welcomed them through the veil. Welcome home, wanderers, Althea's breath caught. Archive, you have brought the stillness into the heart of motion, the voice continued. The continuum sought to unmake change. Their presence has awakened the memory of choice. Oren felt warmth flood through him. Can you stop them? Not alone. The archive remembers, it does not command. But you carry remembrance within you now. You have become part of the pattern. Together we may weave a new outcome. Althea frowned. Together, how? In answer, the floor beneath them dissolved into a stream of living light. They were lifted upward, higher and higher, until they stood suspended above the entire corridor. Below, they saw the fleet scattered amid the broken geometries of the continuum. Some ships burned, others drifted, but their resonance still pulsed, weak, defiant. Beyond them, the continuum's vast form loomed, a horizon of stillness devouring motion. They feed on equilibrium, the archive said. Their strength lies in certainty. To defeat them, you must give uncertainty shape. Oren closed his eyes. Uncertainty given shape, that's creation. He reached outward not with his hands, but with the part of himself the archive had touched long ago. Thought became matter. Intention became form. Around the fleet, bursts of light blossomed, echoes of ships, people, memories, ideas. Every dream humanity had ever abandoned returned as radiant fragments. Althea joined him, her own thoughts merging with his. Together, they gave the fragments rhythm. The corridor itself began to pulse, each beat a testament to imperfection, to striving, to life. The fleet's resonance rose in answer. Yes, the archive whispered, you remember how to sing. The sound spread, first from the ardent hope, then from every ship that still drew power. Their harmonics merged into a complex living waveform. The continuum recoiled as the tone filled the corridor, fracturing the smoothness of their vast structure. Noise, the continuum's voice thundered. Disorder. Althea shouted into the brilliance, her voice ringing clear and human. You call it noise. We call it the future. The resonance intensified. The frozen geometries cracked and melted into rivers of light. The continuum's form rippled, breaking into countless fragments that dissolved into the surrounding brilliance. Oren felt the archive's power surge around them. They are not gone, it warned. They cannot die, only change, but so can you, he nodded, understanding at last. Then let us both remember change. The light engulfed them. The final cry of the continuum faded into the distance, leaving behind silence, not the oppressive silence of absence, but the quiet that follows understanding. When Oren opened his eyes again, he was aboard the Ardent Hope. The lights were dim, systems stable. The hum beneath his feet was soft, alive. Status, he murmured. Althea's voice answered from beside him. All surviving ships accounted for. The corridor is gone, or perhaps we've outgrown it. He looked to the viewport. The stars stretched before them, infinite and clear. No storms, no barriers, just the universe, open and waiting. Casualties? He asked. She hesitated. Many, but far fewer than it should have been. Some of the ships vanished mid-battle. We thought them lost. Now our sensors show faint signals across multiple systems, like they were scattered through space, not destroyed. Oren smiled faintly, seeds in the dark. He turned his gaze to the stars. The continuum wanted perfection. Instead, we gave them possibility. Althea folded her arms, her tone softer. And the archive, he reached out, touching the console. The ship's hum deepened for a moment, as if answering, still with us, or maybe within us. They fell silent, watching the endless expanse. For the first time, neither of them felt small within it. Weeks passed as the fleet regrouped. Worlds that had long been divided by fear now reached out across the stars. The assembly of continuance declared a new age, the age of becoming dedicated to learning rather than dominion. Karath thrived again. Its forges no longer built weapons, but vessels of discovery. Children grew up knowing the names of stars that had never been mapped. In the quiet of each night, faint songs drifted from the furnaces, residual echoes of the resonance that had saved them all. Oren returned there at last, walking the plateau alone. The ground beneath his boots was warm with new growth. He stopped where the ardent hope had once stood, now a museum piece resting under transparent domes. He placed his hand on the ship's hull. "You did well," he said quietly, "better than any of us deserved." A familiar voice answered behind him. "You talked to her as if she were alive." Althea approached, her expression softened by years of understanding. "Maybe she is," Oren said. She smiled. "The Assembly wants us to lead another expedition." He chuckled. "Of course they do. They're calling it the Reach Beyond," she said. "They want to follow the trail of the vanished ships, find where the Continuum's remnants went." He was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "The universe doesn't end. It just waits for us to notice it again." She looked toward the horizon, where construction frames held the skeletons of new vessels. "Do you ever miss the storm?" Oren shook his head. "No, the storm was never the enemy. It was a test. We passed not by surviving it, but by learning to see through it." They stood together, watching the stars brighten as evening deepened. Overhead, the sky shimmered faintly, still bearing the hidden threads of the archive's light. For a moment, the hum of distant furnaces aligned with their breathing, as if the world itself remembered their rhythm. Althea turned to him. "What will you call the new ship?" Oren smiled. "Becoming." She nodded slowly, approving. "Then it will never be finished." "That's the point," he said. "Nothing alive ever is." Years later, children born after the storm would learn their history not as myth, but as truth. They would look at the night sky and know that every star was both destination and beginning. The story of Oren Valen and Althea Rehan would become part of the archive's living memory, a tale whispered by ships that sang as they traveled between worlds. And somewhere, in the vastness beyond sight, the remnants of the continuum drifted in quiet contemplation, no longer seeking to erase motion, but to understand it. Even perfection had learned to change. The universe expanded, not through conquest or domination, but through curiosity. Humanity's echo spread across the endless dark, a single, ceaseless refrain that would never again be silenced. We remember, we change, we become.